This is an interview with Blackmagic Design about their Ursa Mini Pro 12K.
This is a Cinity Gear News video.
Welcome everybody to this Cinity Gear News video. Today we have a talk with Blackmagic Design with Craig. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Nino. How are you doing?
So we've been in this pandemic for way too long, so we have to get used to doing this. Actually, we're recording this on a day where we were supposed to be in Amsterdam for IBC. But this is the good enough replacement we can have. So I hope you're fine with that.
Yeah, look, missing IBC, missing seeing everybody out there, spending time with customers, with friends. I'm actually in our new webinar room. So we've been using this because we have been able to get our technical and sales staff out to meet customers. So we've been using online platforms, set up a little studio space that we can work in. It kind of gets the information out, but it's not the same. And we hope to see everybody as soon as possible.
I agree. I mean, the one positive thing about these interviews that we've done for the last couple of months in this way actually is that I find that people are more concentrated because of course there's not as many distractions and there's not usually the next meeting already looming in 10 minutes. So let's just dive right into the topic, I guess.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the Ursa Mini Pro 12K, which you guys introduced couple of months ago, but now they have started shipping. 12K resolution is really beyond that anyone was really hoping for, I think. We are only getting used to 8K now. Actually, most people are still getting used to 4K, but we're getting used to getting news about 8K cameras, and Blackmagic Design announced a 12K camera. Who is this camera targeted at?
Well, it's 12K really in the way that we've looked at oversampling in previous camera systems. So we have a 6K on the Pocket, 4.6K on the Ursa Mini Pro G2, and the oversampling benefits that you have for resolution delivery at 4K and at 8K. So as we started to design in the camera, we kind of arrived at 12K from a couple of different places. Firstly was to provide an oversampling resolution. We see the camera being used for 8K. If that format now is a target resolution for feature and high-end drama production, then certainly this is our camera that addresses those customers and gives them a Blackmagic option. And then also huge amount of resolution for beautifully erased images and nice sharpness going down to 4K delivery, which we know now is obviously the production standard with most broadcasters, commercial work and everybody else working in 4K. And then the 12K resolution itself leads to some of the work we've done around wanting to have an RGB level sensor and some of the color uniformity that we wanted to drive through the sensor development that we've worked on in the past few years.
Can you give me some example use cases, like the main use cases for people using the Ursa Mini 12K?
Yeah, so in the past month or so, we've put the cameras out to a select group of DOPs prior to the production units going out. And those guys are working all the way from high-end Hollywood features down through streaming company productions and national broadcasters. We've got some commercial customers that are working with global and international brands, so shooting really high-end quality commercial work. We've got a couple of VFX houses that are really interested to see what the sampling is and the resolution works in VFX, and some natural history customers as well, who are keen to see how the camera performs out in the wild. And there's some great opportunities there, both with resolution on wide shots that they can move around in from a 12K frame, or when you go into things like the 4K and the Super 16 mode, that extension on the focal range for their lenses is really interesting as well. So we've got a mixed bag of applications. The camera itself certainly aimed for us at those higher end DOPs and cinematographers, people working at the very highest end in terms of commercial delivery as well, where both resolution is an advantage, but also the color uniformity and the performance of the sensor is key.
It looks very similar to the existing Ursa Mini Pros that have been quite established in the industry by now. You see them on all kinds of productions. But apart from the resolution, what are the other key differences to the existing models in the lineup?
But we kept the Ursa Mini Pro body for this particular camera because it's really a test platform for us. Grant spoke about this in the initial release. What we did is we kind of pulled the guts and the innards of that camera out. We obviously rebuilt the sensor and the image processing elements of the product and the hardware. It needed some improvements or some upgrades to the cooling to deal with that. So from a design point of view, the Ursa Mini Pro body is pretty much the same. The key hardware difference is we've added a USB-C high-speed connector to the output board. So on the back right-hand side of the camera, underneath the I/O board, there's now a USB-C slot that can be used for off-board recording to flash drives. So when you're certainly working at 12K, the data rates are going to be a little bit higher than certainly the SD or some of the CFast options. That's also really quick and easy. We've spoken with previous cameras. You can take the USB drive straight into post and work with DaVinci from the same media. And we have coming shortly as well a new SSD recorder, which will fit to the back of the camera and use that USB-C connection as well. So you'll have another option for your media formats that you want to use with the camera. Other than that, there's pretty much the same camera body, same weight, same design. So it's the same accessories. If you're already using an Ursa Mini Pro camera from the previous versions, you can use the same EVF, shoulder mount systems, your own rigging, whatever, matte boxes, rails, etc. that you've got. So it becomes a nice replacement model rather than a completely new camera design right now.
I mean, while your competition is mainly with new cameras racing around the full frame format, you guys focused on the higher resolution and are still using a super 35mm sensor size. Why is that? Why did you decide to stick with the super 35mm sensor?
I think the Super 35, as we know it, is still the preeminent format for digital filmmaking. And for many cinematographers out there, certainly full frame is becoming something that the higher end camera systems, which are certainly a price bracket above where we are starting to be used. Certainly on Hollywood production, we see a lot of full frame systems. There's a cost imperative on the lenses though at that level. So what we have with the PL mount native on this camera, or the ability to change to EF, is we're still giving an access to our user base and the people that we know we've drawn to Blackmagic cameras in the past 2 or 3 years, the ability to use existing lenses. The sensor itself, one of the things we've spoken about is whether you're shooting in 12K, 8K or 4K, we're giving you the full width of that sensor in those formats. So we're doing on-sensor image scaling if you choose to shoot in less than 12K resolution. So that still means there's an adaptability with EF and PL lenses. And I think the other area that's driving full frame is more on the still side, where we have cameras in the marketplace that are sort of primarily designed around stills, 35mm being the sort of mode of choice there. And then the video options adapt into that format. So we've stayed at Super 35 now because we see that's where the sort of mass majority of use is, but it doesn't rule out full frame maybe in the future for us, but we'll see how the market goes and what customers are asking for.
Okay, in terms of low light capability, 12K are very high resolution, which means that the pixel density on the sensor becomes quite high. Does that in any effect negatively influence low light capabilities of these cameras, also compared to the other models in the Ursa lineup?
It's a bit of a trade-off, and it's something we're seeing in testing and in some of the practical and creative uses of the camera. The sensor with that scale of resolution naturally has smaller photo sites, but there are more of them. So there's a balance there in terms of low light and then what the sensor's doing. The way that we build the RGB symmetrical sensor and the way that we're profiling that adds a little bit more capability back in than, say, compared to if this sensor had a Bayer pattern and the way that it was working. And then what we have as well is we're still achieving 14 stops of latitude. So that's still a huge range that's available to the cinematographer or the operator of the camera. The Blackmagic RAW codec and the way that we process 12-bit retaining tonal information and all of that latitude is important as well. And then even then processing out in DaVinci Resolve, if needed, you've still got things like highlight recovery tools, which give a nice balance within it. And then tying that all together, we've got our new Gen 5 Color Science. So that kind of retains, again, we're looking and we've always tried to achieve what we can in terms of dynamic range through the cameras and a degree of performance in low light. I think what's key with any of those kind of questions, though, is this is a production camera. So it does lend itself to being in an environment where lighting is very much controlled. It doesn't mean you can't shoot it in controlled lower light, but it is something, obviously, leave it in its native 800 ISO and then make sure that you're balancing that correctly out with the lighting that you want to achieve. But you still should be achieving and seeing amazing images off this camera.
You mentioned the new color science, and also, I mean, of course, 12K resolution. A lot of people struggle with actually working now that we have it from other cameras as well. 8K, 8K RAW from other cameras is very heavy in storage very often, and very difficult to deal with on many computers. What can you tell me about how the 12K in Blackmagic RAW is, can be processed even on a laptop?
So this is where Blackmagic RAW comes into play, and the sensor itself and our ability to achieve 12K resolution is the fact that we developed this sensor with Blackmagic RAW in tandem and designed with each other. Blackmagic RAW itself has the ability for us to work in 12K, but almost at Ultra HD codec level in terms of data rates compared to other systems. So that means even when you're working in 12K, your media isn't as heavily sort of demanded upon. I think as a rough guide, if you're shooting at 8:1, which is about middle in the range of the Blackmagic RAW options, onto a terabyte of storage, you're going to achieve about 45 minutes worth of recording time, which is actually really usable in terms of your footprint and your data wrangling. And then also the efficiencies that we have inside of Blackmagic RAW. It's still a 12-bit set of data that you can take through post. But our Blackmagic RAW player will allow you to play that back and review your 12K footage, even on laptops. And then even Grant showed in his demo a few months back when we showed this sort of technical presentation, DaVinci Resolve is now so efficient and powerful running on certain systems that you can run multi-streams of 12K. And a lot of that comes down to the performance power of what we have in Blackmagic RAW next to the performance, obviously, in the resolution at 12K off the camera.
Is the camera using CFast or CF Express?
It's using CFast. So you've got dual CFast cards. As you start hitting some of the higher frame rates on the camera, you'll need to use a dual CFast recording mode, which is enabled in the camera, and that'll just do like an A/B record to either of the two files. DaVinci Resolve will then combine those back into a completed file sequence for you, naturally just in its media tools. There's SD in there as well, so you've got SD card slots for certainly stepping down in the resolutions and for some more affordable media. And then, as I mentioned, you can use USB-C for flash drives or the upcoming SSD recorder. So these are all non-proprietary media options, and you've got 4 choices really in how you want to approach recording off the camera.
The lens mount has become user interchangeable. I mean, how does it work, and what lens mounts are available?
So camera will be PL native, again reflecting that we know that it's really going to be used at that feature level or down through the choice of cinematography and digital filmmaking. There's an EF option. It's the same lens mount that's available on the Ursa Mini Pro G2 4.6K, and it's end user replaceable. So there's just a set of screws to remove from the housing, and you can drop the EF mount on instead of the PL as you'd want to. There's a shim pack if needed in there as well, and there's instructions about how to make sure you're shimming the lens appropriately. And the other option that's available in our set is for Nikon F. So if you happen to be using any of the Nikon F lenses, you can change out for that lens mount as well. Nice.
Is there any autofocus functionality of the camera?
Not currently, no. So this is something that we haven't got on any of our cameras. It's quite a particular technology, quite a demanding technology, and it isn't something that we've added into our camera range. It's a big request we get, and we can see the benefits of it. So I know our engineers are looking at it and seeing what we can do about that. But I think they've been busy developing a 12K sensor first.
Well, you have the resolution, which, like if you have a high resolution, it's easier to have autofocus, I guess. So maybe it's something that can come in the future.
Yeah, certainly something we'd like to look at.
Can you give me some examples of recording times with 12K? Obviously, this is something that most people are not familiar with, this kind of resolution. So I think a lot of people are asking, how much data will it need when I record 12K? And I know you have different compression formats of Blackmagic RAW. So maybe you can just give some examples of the range.
Yeah, so if you look at, say, Blackmagic RAW through the constant bitrate options is the easiest sort of way of modeling this out. 25 frames a second. If you were to record at 5:1, which is the highest quality in that range, you're looking at about 28 minutes. As you go to 8:1, which is around middle of the options, you're getting 45 minutes of recording. 12:1 takes that to around an hour. And then we've introduced a new 18:1, so it's at the top end of the compression and sort of like, the most demanding area, and you're getting around 100 minutes. So going through that range, you can see it's still really manageable. There's still a lot of kind of recording capacity in terms of what you're able to do there, and that would be within a terabyte of space in those sort of minutes and those examples I'm giving.
Awesome. Last but not least, let's talk about the pricing and the availability of the camera. Is it shipping yet, and how much will it cost?
Okay, so the price is $9,995 US. We're starting to ship out the first units of the cameras to customers in the next week or so. So we've had some initial test cameras out, as I say, globally with a set of DOPs. We're hopeful that we can start to get a good number of units out through the factory. We've obviously got a lot of interest and some back orders and people waiting on this camera already, which is fantastic to know. For local information in ordering, it's always best to speak to our leading camera resellers, and they'll give you an idea. They'll speak to our regional managers and give you an idea of where the size of their queue would be, because I wouldn't want to give anybody a kind of idea as to what the immediate kind of number of weeks would be, because it varies on what the queue would be with a reseller. But we'd hope we'll be able to clear out some back orders and get these cameras in the hands of customers really quickly.
Awesome, Craig. Thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to actually reviewing the camera and having our hands on one very soon. So I'm very curious to see what 12K actually looks like.
Fantastic. No, awesome to speak to you. Looking forward to see what you guys shoot with it as well and what your thoughts are on it. And really excited to see this camera going out in the wild and being used.
Absolutely. Thank you, Craig, again. And thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for more news, more gear news videos. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks.